Newcomer Parish, good to be with you to look at a lectionary text for this Sunday. Today we'll look at a reading from Mark chapter 2, 23 through chapter 3, verse 6. Now before we study, let's read it together, listening for God's word as we do. One Sabbath, he was going through the grain fields, and as they made their way, his disciples began to pluck heads of grain. The Pharisees said to him, "Look, why are they doing what is not lawful on the Sabbath?" And he said to them, "Have you never read what David did when he and his companions were hungry and in need of food? Well, he entered the house of God when Abiathar was high priest and ate the bread of the presence, which it is not lawful for anyone but the priest to eat. And he gave some to his companions. Then he said to him, the Sabbath was made for humankind, and not humankind for the Sabbath. So the Son of Man is Lord even of the Sabbath." And again he entered the synagogue, and a man was there who had a withered hand. And they watched him to see whether he would cure him on the Sabbath, so they might accuse him. And he said to the man who had the withered hand, "Come forward." Then he said to them, "Is it lawful to do good or to do harm on the Sabbath, to save life or to kill?" But they were silent. He looked around at them with anger, because he was grieved at the hardness of heart, and said to the man, "Stretch out your hand." He stretched it out, and his hand was restored. And the Pharisees went out and immediately conspired with the Herodians against him, how to destroy him. This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. Now, following Pentecost and Trinity Sunday, the lectionary includes 8 Sundays of gospel readings from Mark, and we'll be looking at each of them either in teaching posts or Sunday sermons for the next couple of months. These readings make us think about the coming of God's kingdom in human life and raises critical questions about the character of God's kingdom and how the power Jesus has over destructive forces of evil in the world clashes against the entrenched power of worldly authorities who want to keep things just as they are, the status quo. Now, the reading for this Sunday comes just after a controversy Jesus had with religious authorities about the subject of fasting. Now, unlike many other Jews, Jesus and his disciples didn't follow customs about fasting. And when the authorities question him about this, Jesus compares his disciples to being the guests of a bridegroom at a wedding banquet. Now, weddings were joyous occasions, not a time for fasting, which is a sign of sorrow. But when the bridegroom, Jesus, will be taken from them by death, then will be the appropriate time to fast. And he then uses the examples of putting new cloth on an old cloak and new wine into old wineskins to talk about how new things can never be accommodated to old structures. Jesus, as the full expression of God's inbreaking kingdom, Jesus is just totally unique. And the old patterns of religions, just so burdened with legalism and skin-deep self-serving piety, they just won't be able to live in Jesus' kingdom. New wine calls for new wineskins, as he says. Now, the 2 stories that follow that one, what we just read, describe the conflict between new and old in terms of authority. And concerning authority, there are 3 issues highlighted in this text. First, there's the affirmation of Jesus as the decisive interpreter of Sabbath law. See, the reading begins with conflict over the Sabbath. The picking of heads of grain to the Pharisees, that was no small, petty, legal thing to those Pharisees. It was a huge thing because Sabbath observance was at the heart of their identity as faithful Jews. As a part of their law, Torah, it helped them to resist the pressures to conform to the broader society. So it was just a fundamental way their lives were ordered. It gave them stability. It was an outward sign of holiness that they shared. And in response to the Pharisees' criticism, Jesus uses the authority of David's example in the story as a justification for what his disciples were doing. And then sets himself even higher on the authority ladder by saying, the Son of Man is Lord even of the Sabbath. Now Jesus, he seems to be designating himself as Son of Man not in the end time sense. Jewish tradition had come to associate that title, but in the sense that he's just not going to allow himself to be reduced to what the tradition wants or needs. His claim to authority is going to demand a rereading of the tradition. Through him, the tradition will be seen just in a brand new light. And then, as if to prove this point, Mark tells about the healing of the man with the withered hand in chapter 3, verses 1 through 6. Now, in this account, Jesus is in charge from the very beginning. He takes the initiative with the man without being asked, and then confronts his critics with the choice of doing good or harm, saving life or killing. And Jesus shows exactly what it means to be Lord of the Sabbath, and what the tradition will look like when seen from his vantage point of view, of the new view. And in addition to showing Jesus to be the decisive interpreter of the Sabbath, this story confronts us with a second issue of authority: Jesus' power over the forces of evil. See, it surprises a lot of readers that stories of Jesus healing the sick don't contain more references to his compassion for the terribly ill people he heals. Many of the accounts are told with very little sympathetic feelings mentioned. But clearly, in many of these stories, what is stressed the most is how Jesus exercises authority. It's like the man with the unclean spirit in chapter 1, 23 through 26, the leper in chapter 1, 40 through 45, and the paralytic in chapter 2, 3 through 12. See, like them, the man with the withered hand symbolizes the control of destructive powers, powers that cripple, distort human life. And Jesus' healing him is more than an act of compassion for the crippled man. It shows a gracious demonstration of divine power that seeks to restore and renew what's been broken. Each exorcism and healing shows that Jesus possesses this power and that forces of sickness can be healed with his touch. Now, it's true we don't today in our thinking make the connection between sickness and the forces of evil like ancient people used to. But still, there's truth to be heard here for us, because the matter of power and how it's exercised and used is still at the heart of many of the problems we face today. So, talking about Jesus' ultimate authority can help us think about how we should use authority in ways that will reflect his example. And the third issue of authority is highlighted in the last verse of our reading, verse 6, where Jesus' claim to be Lord of the Sabbath and his demonstration of the claim by doing good brings forth an immediate and vicious response from the religious authorities. They begin right here to make plans to destroy him. The inbreaking of God's kingdom in the person of Jesus poses a dramatic threat that ultimately leads to his crucifixion. And it's important to recognize why the religious leaders felt challenged by Jesus. Because, the Pharisees, they were not rotten to the core evil people. They also were not narrow-minded legalists who took great pleasure in arguing over the details of their tradition. What they were deeply religious Jews who felt what was needed, was a legal structure that enabled all the people, not just the priests, to take seriously ritual purity and Sabbath observance. And in doing this, they could maintain their distinctive status as the special people God had called them to be his own. This is why Jesus' claim and proof of authority made him a dangerous figure to the Pharisees. Their carefully constructed religious structure was very much at risk in his presence. Their conspiracy to destroy him shows just how clearly they perceived him to be a threat. And even today, Jesus is still considered to be a threat when his life, his teaching, his spirit, his way challenges other competing claims in the world, whether they be religious or ethnic or economic or national. When people are serious about following the way of Jesus, he continues to threaten the entrenched power structures of this world that stand against him. And he always will. Good to be with you today, my friends. Look forward to seeing you on Sunday.